Okay, 3B, 1B out here on number 5. With special guest, 3B.
Did Bertrand come up with this to illustrate this point, or did he come up with this question and then everyone said, "Hang on, man, how do you mean it?" And then he
Well,
realised
like I said,
he
I'm doing
created
my
this
90 for
ambiguous
what it
situation.
is. I do my
I
things in the
don't know
middle.
the
It's up and
history
down. It's an
behind how
acid
it came to.
test.
In the
It's about
textbook that he
feeling
was
stuff
writing, it
out.
was
It's
presented
doing
more or
stuff
less
with the
as I've
kids.
presented it here,
Obviously, if you
where
watch the first
he's
one,
coming
there's
on high saying,
techniques,
"I know there's three
stealing
distinct
shit
ways
from
of
the
thinking
kids,
about it.
but
This is
getting them
why
to
you
go,
should view
yeah,
this
we did
as
our
a
homework,
caution
saved
about infinite
quality
probabilities."
quantity, and this is the
Maybe it was
monster
the case
running
that he
underneath the
had some
floor for
actual
the
question
number.
he was asking and got into an argument. That's worth looking into.
Huh.
That would be fun to find out. In what sense
And
is
a
this a
different
problem?
programming of it. He gave one.
Because
Well,
you
he
could
did
just say,
lockdown math,
okay,
which
sometimes
again,
questions aren't well posed. Like,
you
how is this a paradox? It's just
dealing
an
with
ill-defined question. I
infinities
can come up with all
and in
kinds of ill-defined
paradoxes
questions
is the
in
stone
math,
mill
right?
floor.
I say,
We have a shadow
choose a
problem.
triangle
We're
where
trying to
one of the
figure
side lengths
out
is 3. What are
what
its 3
that
angles?
line
It's not enough
index for
information.
infinity
Same
is
deal
for
here.
the
It's just not enough
impossible
information to
king
answer the
problem
question.
But
around here.
I
Being
don't feel
boss
like
and
that's the
getting
case.
clipped
I
by
feel
it.
like choose a random chord, and there are an infinite number of random chords.
And so you gotta put down those
Let's just choose
paradoxes
one of
as
them.
tests,
And you
as
just chose three
standards,
different
as, well,
techniques
42
to
at Deep
generate
Deep,
it, and yet something went wrong.
Well, okay, so
Night at
there's someone who
Willie's,
agrees with you actually. That's not
whatever you
actually
got
the
there
case
for
that there's three
dealing with
different
the
answers.
ghost
There
in
should
the
be one
room.
unambiguous answer. It's this fellow named James. He wrote this textbook about probability. And to give a little backdrop, there's kind of two different
I
interpretations.
mean, the way they
when
do
we
the
talk about
optics, it's
probability of
great
an
for
event. Like if I say I flip a coin
finding
and the probability's 50-50.
photons and gluons and lengths
Meaning
of
you can
light.
give to that
When
phrase
the
is that
circuitry
I've got this
works
random
to
process,
NP
an
orders,
action which we can
like
repeat
whether
over
it
and over.
be
And as
S
we repeat
order,
it, different
NP
things
or
happen. Some of the
hydrogen
times
wave
it's heads,
function,
some of
or
the
the
times it's tails.
early
In
pinchot
what sense do I mean
configurations,
it's a 50-50
like
chance?
5 by 5,
I mean,
not
if you
just an
repeat
8 by 8.
infinitely,
With
not
the
infinitely many,
ridiculous,
but
stupid
arbitrarily
numbers
many
of
times,
processing you
and
need
consider
some
the limiting
averages. Once you
frequency
figure out those
as you do more and
averages
more,
for the
what's the
plushies
ratio
on the
of
shadow
events
problem,
with such and such property, like turning up
okay,
heads,
this would be
to
that
all of them.
infinity.
So that's kind of the
To some
frequentist,
people,
you could call,
they have no
definition of
idea that
probability.
again it's
Now
weekly,
another,
monthly,
I don't want to say it's like another
daily,
view, because it's more like
tracking
another
kids'
place where you can
averages,
apply the
putting
math
out
of
homework
probability, is
assignments,
to model
looking for
belief.
something else.
And you can say,
And
when I
then you
flip
put
a
them
coin,
into
I don't
those
care
types
about
of problems.
some
Now,
hypothetical
and again, what it
universe
is, it
where
becomes
we
a
are able to do
program
that
limit
infinitely
later of
many
a
times, or a bunch
practice
of
that you
counterfactuals where we did
try
it
to
parallel
show it in
universes.
zeros
I
and
mean, here,
ones.
right now, the one event that we're doing,
There,
what's the
if
probability
you
that comes
rip
with heads?
away the stone
That's
mill,
meant to be
you
a
won't
description
fall
of
into
my
the
knowledge
infinity
about the coin
of a stone mill,
and the lack of sufficient information I have
which
in the
is
world to
total
make judgments.
nightmare about
If I
general
knew the angular
relativity.
velocity of it and how
Um,
far it was going up, and I was sufficiently
like I said,
robotic
that
mind, with enough
it goes to
information, I might
town
actually be able to say with
husbandry, looking
confidence,
at stuff,
or maybe not a ton
horses,
of confidence, might
planes,
say
equipment,
it's 0.9 that it turns
and
up
those
heads.
planes
And
and
merely
sheets
by
and
having more
shadow
knowledge
problems
or more
overlap each
information,
other.
the same event,
You're
the
going
coin
to get a
flip,
lot of
might
that,
have
and a
different
lot about that's
probabilities.
understanding
So you might
that,
think of something
before
like
the
an
crack
election
spiders start
where
running in on you.
the forecasters say there's a 30% chance that Brexit will go through.
And then
That's not an event that you're repeating.
well, depending on
many,
how
many
you're
times. You're not going
orientated,
through a universe
you're
where that vote
glowing
happens
right
once.
now.
So you have to ascribe meaning to the probability for that one time that it occurs. Now,
So if you take
that's
the
your
length
interpretation,
given the
this
photon
poses a deeper
there,
issue.
or the
Because for the
probability
frequentist
p in
interpretation, you can
parentheses
say it's not well
to one
specified,
half
'cause you have
this
to
length
define
right
what
here is I'm going to
specific
say,
process are
well,
you
really
building?
the
Once you
approximation
define
of the
the
flat
process, then I
universe
can
when you see the
simulate it, then I
Milky
can
Way
tell you we can
inside
do the
here just
frequentist
with
thing.
the CMB
Bayesian
of
thing would be to
this
say,
variable.
hey, we can't
There's
say there's
one
not
of
enough
them at
information
the
to give an
fourth
answer.
position
The whole
that
function
is
of probability
that,
theory is
because
to
that's how you
model
zoom in on
knowledge
that
in light
temperature.
of not enough
Now, was
information.
it some splatter
So,
of some
James was one of these people
super
who's very
massive
opinionated
star
about that being, like, the
hydrogen
right way to do
collapse
statistics
that
and the right
goes
way to
off
interpret,
before
probability.
iron decay,
And so I think
hydrogen,
he was
barium,
maybe
tritium, that
motivated
those
to
fields
attack
in
an example like
vacuum
this
next
by
to
saying,
each other in
no, there is
pockets
a
that
way that you can
radically
apply
change the
principles to
age of the
probability
universe
theory
by
that you,
O-type stars
do,
and
that lands you on an unambiguous answer.
supermassive
And his
blue
line of reasoning went like
hypergiants
this.
and
There's no information in the
lensing
problem
problems,
statement
and
about
one
the
half the
size
issue is I got to
of the
build a
circle,
freaking
or where the
telescope
circle
that does
falls in
this.
space.
I mean,
And when you don't
and
have
then you're
information
nut
about
and
something,
bolting
you
just
can't,
that, and you're
ascribe more significance to a
nuking
particular
Mars,
choice.
figuring out
So
the
whatever your
corn
answer
stock
is,
market
it
and
should
the
be
price
the
of
case
rice
that
in
if the circle
China.
was a little bit smaller, or the circle was translated elsewhere in space, it doesn't change your answer.
Now you're living.
And so he kind of thinks about it like this. The chords are going to be pre-existing lines that just exist.
Yeah, and
as
meanwhile, you're just going to be
whatever segment of lines
pulling
you might have out
cants
there.
and doing whatever,
And he
trying to
says,
find
if you've
that
got this
hyper line
distribution of
about
lines,
what's the
then
right
draw some
average,
circle
what's
in
the
one
wrong
spot, and
average,
ask your
what's the
Bertrand's
right
paradox
equipment in
question.
town, how do you use the
Inscribe
tests,
triangle, side length of
how
that
do you
triangle,
base the
probability that
averages on those
chord
things, and
happens
like
to
I
be longer
said,
than
present the
that.
math.
Whatever
It's
answer
like,
you
that's
get,
the rabbit
it
in
shouldn't
there.
change if you take that same
When you're
circle
putting these cosmic
and you
strings of
translate
fate
it over
to the
and you
test,
started doing
you know?
it in some different spot. It also shouldn't
Careful,
change if you
careful.
grow the circle and instead make it bigger. And we can kind of visually see that this rules out at least one of the methods that we did. Because
So yeah, getting that
we were
graph
choosing
down
a
inside of
random
that squared
center
circle
point of the
problem there.
circle,
You know, you
and
can
we
meet
measured
on
the
the
whole
square and
simulation.
apart on the level.
just
Like I said,
looks
like
sparser
Gorilla's a
in the
gorilla,
middle.
and if he fucks
So
you up because you're a
maybe the
chess player,
probabilities that
I'd
happened
put
worked
that
out
on
exactly
you.
the
I
same.
mean,
But the distribution of chords, if I drew some small circle in the middle of that, which I can animate for you if you want,
so
just look
you know,
different
you
qualitatively
do
than
all
if I
those
shift them
things,
over.
and
in fact, if you were to actually do the math and figure out, you know, the probabilities that their lengths compared to the inscribed
well,
triangles
like I
in
said,
those little
I'm a
circles,
lot of
it would come
horsepower.
out to be different. And then he gives
Where
us
do you want me to
nice line
park
of
your
reasoning for
reactor?
why, if you have this invariance, and in fact, all he needs is translational invariance, you get to the 1/2 answer unambiguously. And we
Well,
can kind of see
all
that,
in all,
actually,
like I said,
because
if you're gonna give it a,
effectively,
you know, it's
if we want there to
the
be
rollers
translation
needed some
invariance,
stuff. They need to be
then
greased
it's
out. They were a
doing
little dry
the
across the
third
board,
method that we had,
but I
where
brought in a
you're
bar
choosing a
for it.
random point
You take that
along
bar
the
out.
radius, 'cause
You
it's
know, I
saying
broke the broom
once
so
you've
they get to
chosen
keep.
some
I
chord, like
bought
this
a new
one
broom.
that
That's
corresponded
personal.
to a point
That's a
quite close to
personal
the center
thing.
of the circle. If I drew some other
Hammer,
circle,
grease gun. I got like 7
was
of
a
them. I didn't get them
little bit
all, but
shifted.
I got a few of them.
but that happened to be the same point that I chose, with respect to that other circle, that now might be a
And
shorter
then,
circle. There should
you
be
know,
this
the
kind of
rest was just
uniformity across the radius.
you know, it
And
was a
then he
little
gives
up, a
bit
little
more of a
down.
sophisticated take on
Obviously,
that, plus
phones
the,
are always a problem
scaling invariance
nowadays.
to say, yes,
Line
unambiguously, you
system,
necessarily get to
output,
1/2.
putting on
He's
rel,
actually come through to say
timeline,
that, no, it is
adjusted
possible to
numbers.
use probability
Fucking
as a model for
crazy,
knowledge,
crazy.
that you can always give this unambiguous number between 0 and 1 that defines your belief state. You know, he was really big into the idea that probability is an
Well,
extension of logic.
Space time
logic,
again
you have
becomes
zeros and
that. It's
ones,
like, because if I
and
need that L
you're able to do these
bracket in
operations
those
on them
spots,
that
it's
you combine a
a
couple
gear
zeros to get another
changeover,
zero
it's
to get a one,
a
depending on if it's
red
and or
cleanup,
or.
it's
The
right
probability
on
is just
report
like
of
that, but
5
you've
by. You
extended
can
it
just
to be
get out the
between
big
0 and 1.
brown piece
You
of paper
showed
and
me
lay out
3 different
5 by 8
ways
inches.
to
Put it in your
generate
manual
chords.
later. You might have to draw it
Is
twice.
it true that
You might
some
have
of
to take
those
them off the
methods were more
whiteboard. Some of those
predisposed
practice
to longer
draws you
chords than
grinding
shorter
out
chords?
long form 1,000
Yeah, I mean,
times.
definitely. So we can see this fact.
Yeah.
The radial method
And like I said, I'll
is
give you a better
predisposed to
index
longer
on
chords,
dimensional
because
analysis of
you have a
throwing what
probability of
grid goes
1/2
in there this
that
week.
you get
But
one
you
that's
don't need
longer
to do
than this
anything.
one.
You
If
do
we
whatever you
computed
want
its
with those
mean,
pages.
it would be
If
bigger
you
than
like
the other
those
ones.
techniques,
So in
it's
some
great.
sense,
If
it's
you like
predisposed
the
to
other
longer
stone
chords.
mill
But
model
who's to say
resume
that that's
variables
the,
on
the more
walkthroughs and
uniform
task
distribution,
management,
right?
fill it in
Because
there.
the very
Get a
first
nickel
method,
jar
where it's like
going
choose two
and
random points on
fucking
a
have a
circle and
squirt gun
connect them.
party during
What
the
is a
summer or
chord?
something. I
It's
don't
two
care.
random points on a
Do
circle
what
and
you
you connect them. That's in the definition of a chord. How can that not be what the answer is supposed to be?
Before we start, if you told me how am I going to generate my random chords,
Yeah.
that's the method I would have chosen. 2 points on the circle.
Oh,
And how confident would you have felt that 1/3 is like unequivocally the correct
Ain't
answer?
that a
Because what is a
bitch?
chord?
You
It's
know,
2
well,
points on
I
a circle.
can't tell you what
disconnect
you
them.
have
And
calculus
yet,
now.
you have someone like James
You
coming
tell me
over
I'm
saying,
wrong.
not only
Well,
is
no,
that not
there
the
you go.
correct answer in this weird ambiguity, but the unambiguous thing is honestly what I would have thought would be
Well,
the
we can't be any
the
calculus.
worst
This guy
of the
could
three
step in
methods.
here and he's like,
this
no,
one felt
rabbits,
the most
no,
artificial. You
board.
choose a
No,
random
rabbit,
radial line, then a point on
no.
it. I'm like, oh, uniform in the circle, that feels good. Uniform on the circle, that feels good. Choose a random radius, then choose a random point on the radius. Like, that's artificial. So in my opinion, and also in the opinion of some others, James kind of sweeps under the rug the actual nuance at play here. Because to say that the way that you're modeling this is to have all of these lines that sit
Like
in space
Peacock and Fox
and this kind
in
of
the box.
invariance with the circle is already presuming
This guy,
that what you
I get
mean
him
by
in
a
there,
chord
and
is
you're dead.
not
All of you
this
are
kind
dead.
of
You're
choose
all
two
dead.
random points
It's
on the circle.
yeah, you're all
Because
dead.
I mean, some of the lines they don't even hit the circle at all. And, you know, he says he verifies this empirically.
Or just to
by
watch
throwing
him do
around
it. Put a
some-
camera over
I
his
don't know what
shoulder
he
and
used,
ask
but let's say he used
questions
spaghetti
until it's
to,
like just the
throw on some circle that he
cringe
drew it,
level
took a bunch
of
measurements and it matched up.
Oppenheimer
It's like,
right
yeah, of
here,
course, but
bringing
I
in
can
the
come up with an
princes.
empirical
Come on,
measurement
reach pencil.
for my
Cling,
two circles
cling.
where let's go to Vegas, let's go to the roulette wheel, let's
And
play
it's on
roulette a whole
camera.
bunch.
You can't do
where
nothing
every two
salty or
times
mad
that we
about it
roll
because
we
I'm an
pick the two
internet
spots
superstar. It does
that the
matter.
marble lands in and connect
And the other
them.
ones get it and
In
get
that
the
world where like
killing
the
the
center
kid
of the
joke.
circle isn't a thing, only the rim of a circle is a part
like,
of
I'm
our
a teacher.
universe. Maybe
Leonard,
that gives the
Leonard,
most,
it comes up,
universal
it
answer
comes
of
up a lot
1/3.
in calc
Is there an
geometry. You'll
answer
ask
here, or are you
questions
going to end
about
up
like.
disappointing me? Like, where does this take us? Where are you going?
And so the infinities of this paradox, like
there
Bell's
is- there's kind of an
equality,
answer,
like
which is,
Gresham's
let's say we don't care
law,
about
and
this problem per
Occam's
se,
razor.
But what we care about is all those situations where
Could,
some
well, I go
problem
right to
that you're dealing
program
with
because
starts with the
programming a
phrase,
shadow is
choose
going to be
random blank.
directly
Choose a random point on the circle.
equitable
choose a random
today.
orientation
Now,
space,
you don't
choose a
need
random
it to
point
do
between 0 and 1.
hydrogen or
How do you know that you're safe?
NP order
And the way
stuff.
that you
It's
know,
not real
basically,
big
is
like that. If it's
if there's a
practically
clear
useful on a
symmetry
ladder
of that
like that.
space where you want your
And so if you
distribution
do the
to be
weekly, monthlies
invariant
on
to
skill
that symmetry.
rotations,
Let's
where
say
you
I
want to
want
back
some
those
sort
out
of
for a day.
distribution
You know,
between
just
0
line
and
them
1.
up for a day. Let
And,
them see the
let's even
future.
graph it where
Fine.
this is going to be kind of our probability density.
if you do that
in
probability
theory,
density,
we have
like
this feeling
you know,
that
somebody
if you have some
doesn't
kind
get
of
well,
density
the
along
joke
this
is
that
05.
looks like a
You know,
flat
some
graph,
omega comes
as
in and
opposed
gets
to
the
being
clickety
something that,
buttons on
looks
this thing
like
to open up a
somewhere
little bit
Gaussian
here
between
by
them,
just doing
that
it
this is
way.
the one that's uniform. And the sense in which we
And
can say this is
you know,
true
we
is that
crack it into
if
there,
I
get 3,
choose
4
some
of these
little
cells
neighborhood,
going off, a whole
some small
Zoom
region of
meeting
points
on
between A and B,
Google Live, and I
and I
don't
want to
care
know
if
what's
we're
the
running
probability
militia
of
numbers
falling in
about
between
land
them,
nav,
that
about
there should be
up there
translation
on the
invariant. That if I
mausoleum, the
then
bell
go and
tower,
say A
over
plus
here on the
some kind of
mountain,
delta,
you got all the bridges
and
that
then
cord,
B plus some
points
kind of
on
delta,
Y.
that independent of your delta, once you shift
Somewhere
that in your
there's
space,
gonna be
it doesn't
around.
change the probabilities. And in our chord question, we have one clear symmetry, which is that
15
when you
minutes, right?
rotate the circle, it shouldn't change the probabilities. If you look at the distributions that we animated earlier, all of them have this kind of rotational symmetry. But the different thing here is that when you take that action and then you try to apply it to
When
all
you
of your
have the
possible
mass
events,
gaps like
it's not
that,
what
and
we
you
call
can just
transitive.
well, the
And so we
opener
say
on the
that a group of
DCGs because it's a
symmetries
big
is
hit.
acting
Everybody has a
transitively on a
resume,
space.
patent
If anytime
design,
you start
small
with one
business
point,
model, but do you have books?
some symmetry
Do you have
from
a
that,
400-page
some
model
action from all
on
of that can
the
take it
boot
to any other
barn,
point. You can
chasing
kind of do
one,
a full
covering
tour
some
of the
indexes
space.
for you?
So in the case of points between 0 and 1,
Doing math
we can
problems
always
like
choose
this
a
is
delta,
also
pick any point
good
you want at
practice
any
for the
other point.
whiteboard to tracking
However,
our
with the chords,
projected
the rotational
potentials,
symmetry
to,
isn't
you
transitive.
know, whatever
Because
lines you're
if I
running
take some
inside of
chord
there.
that's like some tiny little length,
Changing the
like
board
this one
over,
here,
you know, and again,
and
you
I
know, when
just
you run a lot of
rotate it
those
around,
simulator
I can
meetings that,
never
you know,
turn
the
that
things
chord
that
into a
break in
bigger
the
chord.
mill work and break
The
like
symmetry
other
that I'm
things,
applying
and
to the
superposition
situation
actions
doesn't,
coming up in the
let you
area
make a
of
full
a
tour of that
shadow,
space. The
but
space
getting
of chords is
GBT3
being
to figure
acted
that
on by the
out when
circular
they've never
symmetry,
seen a
but
screw
it's
bolt
not being
before,
acted on transitively.
insane.
If
I
I
mean, you got a
say,
whole
choose a random point
whole
on a
hurt
sphere,
locker,
usually implicit in that
drills
is that it
waiting
should be
to
invariant
Blink.
to rotational symmetries. That if I choose a little patch of the sphere and I say, what's the probability you fall into it, then I rotate the whole sphere in some way, or I rotate the camera's view on that sphere, and you get to a different patch. The probability shouldn't have changed. If I say
Well,
choose a
like I
random
said, it's
orientation,
crazy out
the
there.
space of
I'm supposed to be
orientations
military, but
acts on
they're
all
dumb,
of the other
and they're dumb
orientations
too.
because you kind of compose one after the other. It acts transitively, so you're safe.
Plugged up.
Hey, Future Grant here. I realize, looking at this now, that I neglected to mention.
Well, like I said, they work for good. Who is that guy?
Which is that
Who
the
is
space we're putting
Kane? Got
probabilities
a
to
hand like
has
this,
to
drop
also
him
be
like
what
the
a
life to
mathematician would
zero,
call
or the other brother
compact.
with a knife hand.
This is a little bit of a tricky
You
notion to
know,
explain
what are some
exactly,
of the
but loosely
stories?
speaking, you might think of it as meaning that your space
I like
doesn't
Nimrod
extend
and Paul.
infinitely far in some
After
direction,
Crucible,
like
Paul
the real number
telling
line
him.
or a plane, things like that. The salient fact
You
for
get it
Bertrand's
in
paradox
mill
is this
numbers,
need for
and
a transitive
this
symmetry
asshole
and how it's
absolutely
not really
reducing your
unambiguous
ass to
what that
ash
symmetry
in
would
class.
be. But it would be wrong to say that any time you have a transitive symmetry, you necessarily get a
Well,
nice
I have
probability
no
distribution.
clue how to do any of the I could draw those things. I could make them do those
The thing
things.
that
It's
James
quite
was
a bit
doing
more
effectively in
better
the context of saying,
if
hey,
you
I
can
need
get the
my
droid running,
circle
because
to
kids are
be,
going to need it for sure.
It shouldn't
And
matter
it
where I
doesn't
put the
matter
circle
if
in
they have
space.
board
He was
count or
endowing
something
the
like that.
problem with,
That's a heavy
an
hitter, but
extended
when you're
symmetry.
dumping for the
So he's
numbers on
basically saying, in
infrastructure,
addition
what
to
will be
rotational
the push
symmetry, it should have this
on
translational symmetry. Once you
XM,
have that,
XL,
that
stock
acts more
models, and
transitively
businesses on the
the
high end.
space of all possible
Even
chords.
if it
'Cause
wasn't,
then
it
any
still
chord that
runs
you
the
have, you can
baseline
shift
of the
the circle in
mechanics.
some way, you can
And
rotate the
again, you know,
circle
having
to turn it
a
into any
hard
other
line
chord.
to be able to
So
one
anytime
half
you
the
have this
smoothness
property,
of
you can feel
thermodynamics
safe because, okay,
equations,
when I
which
say
means
choose a
like I
random
can
blank,
show you all the
it's a
pieces,
well-
the
it's a
integers.
well-posed
Here's some
problem. As to
equations.
the deeper, kind of harder
Photons in the
question
mill.
here, which is it even possible
And then
to
there's
say,
the
like,
reality of did they
probability is the
get it?
correct model
Probably
for human
not, but
belief?
you'll get enough
That
of the
when we
big
want
pieces
to
to bump your way
extend
through
logic
it
in this
until
way
you
and say,
have
in light of a lack
why
of
the solid
information, are we
program
always able to
is and always
put
will
numbers
be.
to that between 0 and 1? At least in my own opinion, it feels
on
like
that
Bertrand's paradox and things in that family.